The dining room glittered with Christmas lights, silverware clinking against porcelain plates. Laughter echoed around the long oak table until my son stood, glass in hand. His voice was steady, his eyes cold. "You are no longer our family," he said, every word slicing sharper than a knife. "We have passed." The room froze. Forks hovered midair. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to burn quieter, as though the world itself held its breath. My relatives smirked, their smug faces basking in my humiliation. One leaned closer to another and whispered, "Finally." I stared at my son, my heart crumbling, but my spine refusing to bend. They thought this declaration was my breaking point, the moment I'd collapse, defeated, erased. But I only gripped the edge of the table, holding back the storm inside me, because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been preparing for this, and when the truth came out, it wouldn't be me left in ruins, it would be them. To understand how we got here, you need to know the beginning. I wasn't born into wealth, but I was raised on principles: honesty, patience, and the belief that family meant protection. While others cut corners, I worked hard, often holding 2 jobs at once. In the mornings, I repaired appliances for neighbors. At night, I managed inventory at the local store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it kept food on the table. My home reflected that same steady rhythm: the hum of the old refrigerator, the scent of lavender from the garden I kept out back, the photo frames lining the mantel. Each frame told a story: birthdays, graduations, my son as a boy holding my hand with a smile so wide it could melt steel. But over the years, I started noticing cracks. Not in the walls of my house, those I could fix, but in the people I loved. At gatherings, my sister would shower her children with expensive gifts while handing my son and me token trinkets, almost as if she wanted us to see the difference. My brother, sharp-tongued and arrogant, would laugh a little louder at my mistakes, his smirk lingering just a little too long. It was favoritism, clear as day. Yet, instead of fighting, I brushed it off. I told myself, keep the peace, hold the line. But then came the first sting that I'll never forget. It was Thanksgiving, 2 years before that Christmas dinner. The family had gathered in my sister's sprawling house. Her chandelier sparkled above a table set with crystal glasses, roasted turkey, and bowls of steaming sides. Everyone was served generous portions, except me. My plate was noticeably smaller, almost empty. When I reached for the mashed potatoes, my brother laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful," he said, grinning at the others. "Leave some for the rest of us." "We wouldn't want you overindulging." The table erupted in chuckles. I felt my face heat, the sting sharper than any slap. My son's fork froze midair, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't matter, but inside, something hardened. That night, after we drove home in silence, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a small object, a ceramic piggy bank shaped like a house. My son had given it to me years earlier with the words, "For our future." That bank held every extra dollar I managed to save. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I ran my hand over its surface, thinking, someday this will mean something. Someday they'll see. I didn't know then how prophetic that thought was. From that Thanksgiving forward, the pattern grew clearer. My family wasn't just dismissing me, they were erasing me. Every party, every gathering came with another humiliation. A chair pulled away, a whispered joke, a gift forgotten. And though I tried to shield my son, the message seeped through. We were less. But here's the truth they never saw. Quiet people notice everything. And while they thought I was shrinking, I was paying attention, storing every slight like a record in my mind. I didn't fight back yet, not then. Because sometimes silence is sharper than a blade. And when the moment came, my silence would end. The slights didn't stop after Thanksgiving. They multiplied. Every family gathering became a performance, and I was always the punchline. At my niece's birthday party, my sister handed out gift bags filled with toys and gadgets to every child. My son got a broken puzzle missing half its pieces. I caught the way she smiled as he forced a polite, "Thank you," his little hands gripping useless cardboard. At Easter, when we brought a carefully baked pie, something I'd worked overtime to afford the ingredients for, it was set aside on a counter, untouched. "We already have enough desserts," my brother announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Later, I saw him toss it into the trash. Each time the room erupted in laughter, or worse, silence. A silence that told me everyone else had already chosen sides. I tried to endure, but the strain clawed at me. Nights grew long. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the old clock, my chest tightening with every second. My thoughts spun like a storm. Am I overreacting? Is it me? Or is it them? Sleep never came easy. When it did, it was shallow, restless. I'd wake to the ache in my jaw from grinding my teeth, my hands clenched as if I had been fighting in my dreams. Even at work, I carried the weight. My boss asked once why I looked so tired. I shrugged it off, but the truth was simple. I wasn't just tired. I was worn down. My son noticed too. He began spending more time in his room, headphones on, avoiding the dinner table conversations that used to bind us. The spark in his eyes dimmed, and I wondered if the poison from my family was seeping into him. That thought terrified me more than anything. One night, after another bruising family dinner, I sat on the back porch. The air was cold, sharp with the scent of pine. I stared at the piggy bank on the table beside me, the faint jingle of coins inside sounding like a heartbeat. My hands trembled. For the first time, I felt truly alone. And then, I wasn't. "Rough night?" The voice came from the other side of the fence. It was Mrs. Carter, my neighbor. She was a retired teacher, her gray hair pulled back neatly, her eyes sharper than most people gave her credit for. I tried to brush her off with a smile, but she didn't let me. "I see how they treat you," she said. "I've seen it for years." Her words landed heavy, like a weight shifting off my shoulders. Someone had noticed. Someone besides me. She leaned over the fence, her voice lower now. "You don't deserve it. And you're not alone. People like them. They always think they're winning. Until they don't." For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost. Hope. I nodded, unable to speak, afraid my voice would crack. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. Hope is a fragile thing. Once it sparks, it either fades or ignites into fire. For me, it became fire. With Mrs. Carter's words echoing in my mind, I started paying closer attention to everything my family did. Every insult, every slight, every manipulation. I began writing it down. I kept a small notebook hidden in the drawer beneath the piggy bank. Dates, words, actions, evidence. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about humiliation anymore. They wanted control, and I wouldn't give it. The breaking point came at a family meeting. That's what my sister called it, though it felt more like a trial. We gathered in her living room, the chandelier glowing harshly above us. The air was thick, like a courtroom before sentencing. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his grin wolfish. "We've been talking," he began, "and it's clear you're not pulling your weight. You don't contribute enough. You don't belong in the same circle. Honestly, you're more of a burden than family." My sister nodded along, her lips pursed in mock sympathy. "Maybe it's best if you keep your distance. For everyone's sake." Then came the dagger. My son, sitting silently in the corner, lowered his gaze. He didn't speak, but his silence hurt worse than words. It was as if they had convinced him too. For a moment, I felt the walls closing in. The voices around me blurred, the room tilting. I was cornered, outnumbered, erased. But then, clarity. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Calmly, I placed it on the table. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the deed to my house. Paid for. Signed in my name. Every dollar earned with my own 2 hands. Not one of you contributed. Not one." Their faces shifted. Shock, confusion, anger. I looked directly at my brother. "You laugh at me for being small, but I own more than you'll ever claim without someone else's money." For the first time, his smirk faltered. My sister's eyes darted to the paper, her mouth tightening. I wasn't finished. "You call me a burden, but the truth is, I've carried more than any of you. Quietly, patiently. And when this family needed help, who fixed your appliances? Who lent money without interest? Who showed up when no one else did?" The silence was sharp enough to cut glass. For a moment, I thought maybe this would stop them, that the truth would finally pierce their arrogance. But I underestimated their pride. My brother leaned forward, his fists clenched. "Paper doesn't mean power," he hissed. "You think a deed makes you equal to us? Number. It makes you a target." And just like that, the fire in his eyes told me everything. They weren't backing down. They were doubling down. I leaned back, my voice lowering to a calm steel. They thought they still had control. They didn't. After that night, nothing was the same. The masks my family used to wear, the polite smiles, the staged affection, were gone. What remained was open hostility. The campaign began quietly. Whispers at church, little smears dropped into conversations. "They're struggling, barely keeping the house. Maybe they're unstable." I'd walk into the grocery store and feel eyes on me, neighbors offering smiles that carried pity instead of warmth. Then came the louder moves. My sister spread a rumor that I'd borrowed money from her and never paid it back. It was a lie, but lies move faster than truth. My brother told anyone who'd listen that I was emotionally unstable, dangerous even. Soon, invitations to neighborhood gatherings stopped arriving. My son's friends' parents began keeping their distance. It was working. They were isolating me. But they underestimated the one thing I had learned from years of being silent: patience. Every text message they sent, I saved. Every voicemail dripping with insults, I recorded. Every financial receipt, every contract, every bill, I organized into files. My kitchen table became a war room, papers spread across the surface like a battlefield map. Mrs. Carter would sit with me sometimes, sipping her tea, her sharp eyes catching details I might have missed. "Document everything," she'd remind me. "Bullies thrive in shadows, drag them into the light." My son, too, began to notice the cracks in their lies. He overheard his uncle mocking me to a neighbor, laughing about how pathetic I was. That night, my son sat at the table with me in silence before whispering, "I didn't know they hated us that much." I put my hand on his. "They don't hate us," I said quietly. "They hate the truth." The piggy bank sat in the center of the table, coins rattling faintly inside. It had grown heavier over the years. But now, it wasn't just money. It was a symbol. Proof of every sacrifice, every ounce of effort, every drop of dignity I refused to let them take. The pressure, though, was suffocating. My body bore the toll, headaches that pulsed like drums, a constant tightness in my chest, sleep slipping further from reach. Some nights I stood at the window, staring into the dark street, wondering if this battle would ever end. But through the fatigue, I sharpened myself. Therapy helped me put words to wounds I'd buried. Quiet workouts in the early mornings gave me strength. And every document I filed was another weapon loaded. Meanwhile, their empire began to crack. My brother's business, built on arrogance and shortcuts, faced complaints. My sister, desperate to hold her grip, lashed out at anyone who questioned her. Neighbors whispered, not about me, but about them. And I? I no longer shrank when I entered a room. I carried myself taller, calmer, knowing I had the truth in my hands. The day was coming. I could feel it in my bones. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The storm broke on a gray December afternoon. A family intervention, they called it. But the word was just camouflage. In truth, it was an ambush. We gathered in the church hall. The smell of old wood and candle wax thick in the air. Rows of folding chairs formed a circle. My sister sat at the head, her posture stiff with self-appointed authority. My brother lounged beside her, arms crossed, smirk plastered on his face like armor. Around them were cousins, aunts, even neighbors they'd dragged into the spectacle, an audience for my public unraveling. My son sat 2 seats away, caught between worlds. His eyes flicked to me, uncertain, as if he wasn't sure which side to stand on. My sister cleared her throat. We've all agreed it's time to address the issues. You've caused too much tension, too much division. It's unhealthy for everyone. My brother leaned forward, his voice sharp. You're toxic. Always playing the victim. Frankly, you don't belong here anymore. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few nodded, others looked down. My chest tightened, but my hands were steady. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. My voice was calm, deliberate. You've called me toxic, a burden, a failure. But I've kept quiet long enough. I pulled a folder from my bag and laid it on the table. Papers fanned out. Copies of deeds, receipts, text messages, printed voicemails, evidence. This, I said, sliding the deed forward, is my home. Paid for in full. Not with your help. Mine. This is proof I've carried my weight, and more gasps echoed through the hall. My sister's face flushed red. My brother shifted, his smirk faltering. I turned to the crowd. Here are the messages, the lies, the insults, the manipulations. You wanted to paint me as unstable? Look closer. Who's unstable here? I read aloud one of my brother's voicemails, his voice booming in the quiet room. You're pathetic. Everyone knows it. You'll never be anything but a joke. The words hung heavy. The silence that followed was louder than any laughter I'd endured before. My son's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked at his uncle not with admiration, but with disgust. I straightened, my voice sharper now. I don't want apologies. I want change. And if change doesn't come, then understand this. You no longer have power over me. Not with your words, not with your lies, not with anything. My sister opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My brother's hands trembled, his knuckles white against the chair. The empire they had built, an empire of whispers and control, was crumbling in real time. I could feel the shift in the room. Neighbors glanced at one another, uneasy. A cousin, who had once joined their laughter, now turned her gaze toward the floor. The truth had landed, heavy and undeniable. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in silence. They were. And as I gathered my papers, sliding them neatly back into the folder, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. After that day in the church hall, everything shifted. The ones who had once mocked me no longer held the same sway. The silence that followed my words was not the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of collapse. The fallout came quickly. My brother's swagger dissolved. Whispers about his cruelty began to circle back to him. The neighbors he once courted avoided his gaze, no longer eager to laugh at his jokes. His business, already shaky, buckled further under the weight of complaints and distrust. My sister tried to hold on longer. She organized smaller gatherings, inviting everyone but me, hoping to restore her little empire of favoritism. But the energy was gone. People saw her now for what she was, a woman who built power by cutting others down. Without the audience, her stage went dark. And me? I began to breathe again. I framed the deed to my house and hung it in the hallway, not as a boast, but as a reminder. This was built by my own hands. The piggy bank, once tucked away, now sat proudly on the mantel. It was filled with crisp $2 bills, a quiet symbol of both survival and rebirth. My son, he changed too. The boy who once looked down at his plate in shame now stood taller beside me. He apologized, softly, for the moments he doubted me. I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. "The weight wasn't yours to carry," I said, "but you'll never carry it again." Slowly, we built a new rhythm. Dinners at home turned into laughter again. Mornings began with peace, not dread. I poured energy into small joys, painting the fence, planting more lavender in the garden, even baking pies that were eaten, not discarded. And the community, those who once turned away, began to return. Mrs. Carter invited us for tea more often. Neighbors stopped by with kind words. One even admitted, "I should have spoken up sooner." Their regret wasn't necessary, but it showed me the truth. Light spreads once the shadows are broken. Still, the greatest change wasn't around me. It was inside me. I no longer needed their approval, their validation, or their empty invitations. I had found something stronger: boundaries, resilience, and a voice I would never bury again. On Christmas Day, exactly 1 year after the night my son spoke those cruel words, we set our own table. No chandeliers, no crystal glasses, just the glow of candles, the warmth of roasted food, and laughter echoing off the walls of a home that was ours. As the fire crackled, I glanced at the piggy bank and smiled. It had once been a fragile dream. Now it was proof that we had survived, endured, and rebuilt. That wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. Because family isn't always who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when the storm breaks. And I knew now, without question, that the storm had passed. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or the crushing weight of someone else's control? Have you ever been silenced, humiliated, or made to feel small in your own family, your own community? I know that pain. I lived it. But I also know this: their power only lasts as long as your silence. When you stand, when you claim your worth, the walls they build around you will crumble. So I want to hear from you. What battles have you fought? How did you rise above them? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need your voice the way I once needed mine, because worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself, and once you do, no one can take it away.